Okay, imagine a document just lands on your desk. It's not a stock tip, it's not a weather forecast. It is a list of the next major breakthroughs in cancer treatment. And here's the kicker. It was predicted months before anyone else knew. Sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? Well, today, we're going to look at something that gets eerily close to that. The date on this document is April 10th, 2026. And no, this isn't some dispatch from the future. This is a real intelligence briefing generated by an AI platform called GaiaLab. So let's take a closer look at what it actually found. And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the story. This is a list of the AI's predictions. You can see it right there. It predicted that the drug temozolomide would be trialed for a type of brain cancer, and boom, 109 days later, it was. It predicted sotorasib for colorectal cancer. 139 days later, a clinical trial was posted. It went 5 for 5. These were not lucky guesses. They were specific, data-driven forecasts. Which, of course, brings us to the big one, the central question of this whole explainer. How on earth is this even possible? How did an AI system manage to look into the incredibly complex world of medical research and pull out these future events with such amazing precision? Well, to answer that, we've got to peek under the hood a little bit. We need to understand what makes this particular AI tick, because it's not just about raw processing power. It's about a fundamentally different way of looking at scientific data. All right, so here's the secret sauce. GaiaLab's power really comes from two key ingredients. First, it's not using some static, dusty old textbook of information. No, it plugs directly into over 40 of the world's most important biological databases, in real time as they're updated. We're talking about PubMed, clinicaltrials.gov, all the latest stuff. But the second ingredient, that's where things get really interesting. See, it's not one single AI brain crunching all the numbers. It's a team of 6 specialized AI agents that literally argue with each other over every single conclusion. The whole system is designed to mimic a human scientific review board, to challenge assumptions and demand hard evidence before anything makes it into the final report. And here's how that debate works. It's a pretty neat 4-step process. First, you have the hypothesize agent. Think of it as the creative one. It generates an initial idea. Right away, the critique agent, the skeptic of the group, jumps in and tries to poke holes in it. Then, the evidence agent gets to work, digging through all those live databases to find the actual data that can settle the argument. And finally, the synthesize agent, it's like the team captain, takes all the arguments and the counter-arguments and pulls them together into one single conclusion, complete with a confidence score. Now, a clever internal debate and a fast process. That all sounds great on paper. But it really all comes down to one simple question. Are the results any good? Let's take a look at the actual scorecard. So, to date, GaiaLab has made and publicly logged, get this, over 10,000 drug predictions. That is a massive number of hypotheses generated by that internal AI debate. And of those thousands of predictions, over 2,000 have already been matched to real-world clinical trials that were launched after the AI made its prediction. I mean, that's a pretty incredible hit rate. But the next number, that's the one that really demands our attention. 100%. Seriously, you almost never see that number in science. And this is GaiaLab's score on a really key industry metric called precision at 10. So, what does that actually mean in plain English? It means that when the AI analyzed 22 different diseases, its top 10 drug recommendations for every single one were already being tested in active human clinical trials. So it's not just finding random ideas, it's finding the right ideas, the ones that the top human researchers are also betting on. Okay, 100% score is kind of headline that makes you sit up and pay attention. But in science, whenever something looks a little too good to be true, you have to start asking harder questions. A healthy dose of skepticism isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential. And that brings us to this fantastic analogy from a recent article in the ASCO Post. Judging an AI on these metrics, it's kind of like judging a restaurant by the long line of people outside. Yeah, it's a strong signal, it's a useful shortcut, but it doesn't actually tell you what's happening in the kitchen. It doesn't tell you if the food is actually any good. And that is the absolute core of the challenge with these powerful new tools. Is the AI actually learning the deep causal links of biology? Or has it just gotten incredibly good at spotting clever statistical shortcuts? So, using that same restaurant analogy, correlation is seeing the long queue outside and just assuming the food must be great. Causation, that's actually going inside and tasting the food to know why the cue is there in the first place. Just seeing two things happen together is not at all the same as understanding that one causes the other. A recent study in Nature Biomedical Engineering gave a perfect and honestly a slightly worrying example of this. An AI was trained to find something called the BARF mutation in colorectal cancer images. But instead of learning what BARF itself looks like, it took a shortcut. It learned to spot a different biomarker, MSI, which just so happens to often appear alongside BARF. Now, the AI got a high accuracy score, but it learned the wrong lesson. And in a real clinical setting, that kind of confusion could lead a doctor to prescribe the wrong treatment. So this shortcut problem is very real, and it's a critical challenge we need to solve. But even with that limitation in mind, what does this technology as it exists right now tell us about where medicine is actually heading? Because even if the AI is taking some shortcuts, the ability to generate and validate hypotheses at this kind of scale, well, it points toward a truly revolutionary future. It's the dream of taking the entire clinical trial process and moving it inside of a computer. The formal term for this is an in silico clinical trial. It's the idea of creating these individualized computer simulations, basically virtual patients, that we can use to test new drugs and treatments before we ever have to involve a single real person. And the promise here is just enormous. We could use these simulations to reduce the size and cost of human trials by deciding them better from the get-go. We could refine them by knowing which virtual patients might have bad side effects. And in some cases, we might even be able to replace certain stages of animal testing or early-phase human trials entirely, saving time, money, and, of course, improving safety. And that brings us to our final thought here. The emergence of tools like GaiaLab really does represent a fundamental shift in the very nature of scientific discovery itself. You see, for centuries, the bottleneck in science has been our ability to generate and test hypotheses. It's a slow, super expensive process. But if an AI can now do that at a massive, almost instantaneous scale, the whole challenge shifts completely. Maybe the new bottleneck, the most valuable human skill in this new age of AI, is no longer about finding the answers, but about learning how to ask the right questions in the first place.